Today on the show, strategy plus action equals getting your clients to apply what you teach. Great coaches and consultants like you have the ability to change people's lives and transform entire organizations. And your impact can often go far beyond the clients you work with. One of the reasons I love working with coaches and consultants is because of that ripple effect. This show is here to highlight your expertise and empower you with resources and new ideas to grow your business. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Welcome to episode 52 of Strategy in Action. And in this episode, and the next two episodes as well, we've got Anshar Seraphim. I have just had a blast getting to know Anshar over the last couple of months, really. Saw him on Steve Sims' interview and just was amazed at the subject matter of different personality types, of course. Just all of that fascinates me. But then to dig in and get to know Anshar outside of that, he is so knowledgeable and not, I've learned about this from a book kind of knowledgeable, although that's where it starts a lot of times, but real world application and knowledge and what he's done to teach himself these skills. It's impressive enough just to have a goal and say, I'm going to be good at this thing. It's even more impressive when you realize that Anshar's neurodiversity, his being almost nonverbal until age 11 due to undiagnosed autism, he's had to work even harder than a lot of folks would just to function in these roles and these areas of expertise that he has, much less excel. And that's one of the things that's so incredible about his story, certainly. But what he brings to these next few episodes, get ready because you'll be learning a mile a minute, and it in the best way possible. But it's not simply knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's how you as a coach, a consultant, a business owner can apply a lot of these skills in ways that maybe you didn't even think about before, to improve your marketing, have better sales conversations, all of these different areas, even, trying to get your clients to maybe apply what they've learned. But in this process too, we also learn how to use the same set of skills on ourselves so that we learn better in anything that we're trying to do. So I encourage you to jump in with these. Today we've got part one of my interview with Anshar, and again, two more just chock full, amazing interviews as well. So let's jump in. Anshar, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, this is a blast. We had the good fortune to connect a couple of weeks ago. Heck, I guess a couple of months ago now, seeing you on Steve Sims' interview that you did there just blew me away. So we connected there when we really dug into personality types and going through all of that, which just fascinates me so much. And then, I realized very quickly over the last couple of weeks, we need to have probably 20 episodes with you. So out of respect for your time, maybe we'll narrow it down to 2 or 3, but there are so many amazing, applicable topics that you have this expertise in, and people watching, people listening are going to find out really quickly why I'm saying what I'm saying, not just because you have knowledge in these areas, but you have experience in these areas, but also to the audience here, coaches, consultants, business owners, how these things that maybe they've never thought of before are very applicable to their own lives. And, today I really want to dig into that aspect of learning new information, conveying new information. But let's give people a bit of geography for you here in that expertise in public relations, sales, negotiation, personality types, et cetera, et cetera. And so many different areas. Give people a little bit of this background. I think a little bit of your history helps just frame all of this to see, oh, this is why you dove in here and your different areas.
So I've been studying psychology and neuroscience for the better part of 2 decades, but it wasn't out of a desire to become a scientist. I do have a scientific mind, and that is something that appeals to me. But for me, it was my personal struggle with autism. I came from that era where a lot of people went undiagnosed, and it was only 2 years before I graduated high school that they had come up with a diagnosis for Asperger's, which has since been merged in with the DSM. So that was a real big challenge for me, just because I didn't find out that information until I had already literally joined the military, to go into cryptography and then into IT. And so when I started to see some of the same social difficulties that I had in growing up in high school and all of that, and then I started to see that mirrored in my experience in the military, the big difference there, because we for better or worse live in a country where our capitalism is kind of tied to our medical care. And so there's when you're growing up, especially depending on your income level and stuff, you don't always necessarily go to the doctor for everything. Depending on where you're at, sometimes Robitussin has to cover it. But so when I was in the military, I accessed all the medical care and the counselors and all of that, and I recognized I was having some of those same challenges. That was when I sought help. And then for the first time, I ended up getting a lot more exposure to that, and I ended up finding out that I was on the spectrum. And of course, I didn't know what that meant. But I did recognize, all the stuff that they were talking about. I had a lot of difficulty controlling the tone of my voice. I couldn't make eye contact. My facial expressions weren't appropriate. I had a lot of one-sided conversations with people, focused on special interests, sensory issues. And so going through that whole process, and then it eventually resulted in me doing like an entry-level separation from the military, because I was only like my first, 7 months of training and all of that. I'd gone through boot camp, become a sailor and all of that. But there was a recognition that there was some skills that I was missing, and some stuff that went along with my disability that I hadn't been prepared for, didn't even know how to process. And
sorry to interrupt, but so because you were even like almost nonverbal to like age 11, right?
Right. So, and what that looks like, it's there's an inability to be able to express things. Plus, there's also a ton of anxiety that goes along with communicating and sharing with other people. And so, I have a bunch of pictures of me at younger ages, and I can share those with you after. Maybe you can splice a few of them in here. But you'll notice that in all of my photos as a kid, that I'm not looking at another person. My eyes are almost always mostly closed because I wasn't able to handle the light input. I had like a standard, just like a weird smile on my face, and I didn't know any other facial expressions to be able to do. And then lots of odd head positioning, whether that's moving my ears away from sources of noise, or maybe someone's touching me, and so I'm like trying to process that at the same time in the photo. And you'll start to see, because I've gotten to work a lot. I've been blessed to work a lot with in the subject of neurodiversity and all of that now. You see a lot of those same traits in people, regardless of their facility with, their whether or not they have any intellectual impairments or social impairments. So I had a really big river to cross. I went into my 20s. I never really, had a relationship. I didn't really have any close friends. Most of the friendships that I had were just centered around an activity. I would find a couple of activities to do that required at least one other person, and then I would go and do those activities every once in a while to just kind of get that social feed a little bit. But constantly was frustrated with other people taking me the wrong way, people having strange reactions to a lot of the features of ASD that are very difficult to control. And it can manifest itself a few different ways. One of them is inappropriate humor, because we don't necessarily know social context. And we know that, at least in my case, I knew that when you tell a joke, someone likes that and you make people laugh. So maybe that'll make people like you. But if you don't have the ability to either tell a joke effectively, or you don't know the kinds of jokes you should or shouldn't tell to certain people, that can get you into a lot of trouble. And I think the first step for a lot of people when they're trying to overcome some of the social difficulties with disabilities like that is we learn to mask. And that just means trying to appear like a neurotypical, like a normal person as much as possible. But the downside to that is that you're really socially severely punished when you make a mistake. If you're direct with people from the beginning that you have challenges, then they're a lot less likely to take your accidental, special interest, one-sided conversation or lack of emotional reciprocity personally. But if your goal is to try to, quote unquote, feel normal, and you do a fairly good job at that, and then that natural behavior creeps in, accidentally talking about yourself in response to someone sharing or going on and on about a topic, if a person's not neurodivergent, they're doing those things because they don't respect you, you're a jerk. So you'll get a very negative social reaction. So what I learned from putting all of that effort into that is that, positively sharing your challenges with other people, not in a negative way, but just to kind of give a little check-in, and then being able to refer back to that. If there's some frustration, it can help with that cognitive reframe, and that started to give me a little bit of the wings that I needed, with the right people to lift up. And then, basically what I did was I made psychology and cognitive neuroscience into an autistic special interest for me. And that was how I was able to deep dive into that topic, because there was such a giant gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. I mean, I didn't even get my driver's license until I was 37 years old because of my sensory issues. So I've had a pretty interesting journey. But what that journey's taught me is that deconstructing the psychological, sociological systems that allow people to be able to relate with one another, it taught me the dynamics that I was missing. And from the process of being able to apply those things in my own life and overcome my own challenges and fail upward, basically, I got to a really, really good sense of the transformative processes that are necessary in order to be able to make lasting change, because I literally had to change myself to be able to socially adapt, to be able to have those things that I was hungering for. And that process taught me so much. And I never at first thought that I would be transmitting those to other people. I mean, it was a process of personal development. It wasn't something I was doing for a piece of paper or something like that. So for, since I was like 15 years old, I've been working in information technology and, everything from building computers and networks and, storage media and all this stuff. And then, so I thought I was going to be doing that for a living for my whole life. And then I went to Oregon, and, first I had like a tech job down in Mississippi. This was before Katrina hit. Katrina threw me out of my butt. But that was my first sales experience, and I had to like start working on my people skills. And then by the time I got to from Mississippi up to Oregon, they had a whole bunch of tech giants. There's a whole bunch of big tech companies up there. But what I didn't know is that there's also a ton of universities, and so job competition is super, super high. And so I had savings and all of that, went up there, and then I couldn't find a tech job to save my life. And so I just started looking around and knocking on doors. I almost took a midnight stocking job at a grocery store. And then I got myself an interview at a jewelry store. And that was terrifying, not because of sales. I knew about sales. But here's an entire industry that's focused on building relationships with other people, with your clientele, helping them share emotional experiences with one another, and selling a product that has social and emotional value.
Oh,
and we try to think about the precious metals and stuff, but
yeah.
So, that was really intimidating. But I think that one of the things about this process that I've gone through is that I'm not intimidated anymore. What I saw was an opportunity to get a whole bunch of skills that I was still weak at, and be able to work on them. And you get forged by fire in that, because if you're working 30 to 50 hours a week in that environment and completely immersed over and over again in those interactions, that's the kind of deep immersion that you need to learn that new language. They say if you want to really learn a new language, you go and live somewhere for a few months, because with the necessity of it, you will learn. And that's what happened. And then I had to systemize that. And in the process of systemizing that and making observations and learning more and doing more reading, it was kind of like going to college for me in a way. And then by the time I got through to the end of that experience, I not only was managing my own, $2 million unit with 6 to 10 employees, but then I was also doing the training for the pod meetings and the manager meetings, and by the time that it was done, I was the training facilitator, for the Pacific Northwest up there when all the stores would meet, and I got to individually train hundreds of sales associates. And I also did something similar in college. I was over in a Sierra college, and it was one of their satellite campuses up in Truckee, California. And so because it's a satellite campus, it's away from the main campus, there's only limited resources, even though there's a good student body and faculty and whatnot. But you went to the library resource center, and there was not a lot of staff, not a lot of help there. And so I ended up taking a tutoring job, and I was the only academic tutor at a college for like 2 years. So I tutored every subject, astronomy, mathematics, organic chemistry, all of it. And that was exciting for me. At one point, I think like a year in, the library resource center person, she's like, "Oh, we got to get another person in here to get you some help." I'm like, no, I love the challenge. I love, someone coming in, and I've never even taken that class, and I need to get completely familiar with the entire textbook and the syllabus of that particular professor, and then have a meeting with them before I start tutoring that subject in just a week. I would love to do that. That's great. Let's do that. Let's keep doing it. And then I got into disability services there too, and started helping other people with disabilities. So that process, which has spanned the better part of 2 decades, has taught me so much. And eventually, I got over that hump of being able to transmit that information to others. And now that same process that I use to reinvent myself and help express myself, and help relate to people, socially, psychologically, it has informed my ability to do that for other people. And so now that's what I do for a living. And I never in a million years would have guessed that, but I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's so strong. And what that shows us all is that these things that people often mistake as just natural abilities or whatever it may be, these are learned skills. And we can all be on, have different strengths in it. Maybe we're more naturally outgoing or this and that, but these are all skills, and that should be
natural
good news.
Skills.
Yeah.
Natural skills can be a liability too, because even if you're very, very good at doing something, if you don't understand the nuts, bolts, and pieces that go into that as a product of synthesis, then you may not necessarily be able to do it intentionally. You may not be able to do it reductively and take certain parts out of that approach because it's a natural approach. You don't know which people you should and shouldn't do it with. One of the things that hit me early in sales, and this is something that happens to every salesperson, this is a universal experience, you can ask anyone, is you'll start working in a sales industry and you start working with a client, and it's almost like this beam of light comes down with the angelic chorus, and everything just goes effortlessly. It's like a greased machine, and you resonate so well with that person that they leave with a giant smile on their face. You have a giant smile on your face because you've given them all the products, services, everything that they need, and you can see that their happiness and investment in that. Plus, you take a look at your sales screen and your top salesperson for the day, and you afterward, you're celebrating that success, and you say to yourself, why can't all the sales be like that? And answering that question was really hard, and I came up with the answer. And the answer is that other person has enough in common with you. You've established enough of a pure relationship that you have psychologically come around the outside of the counter and are now sitting on the same side of the counter with them and helping them in the process of being in that store, rather than adversarially selling them something in that store. And because you get into that peer group, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, all of the dynamics change. You're no longer persuading them, you're informing them, and they want that information because they're able to see you as somewhat of a version like themselves, even if it's themselves in a different process or stage of development. And that creates that empathy and that resonance that completely cognitively reframes all of the information that you're saying, the way that it's being taken. And it completely changes that dynamic. And so what I learned was that if you learn to dissect that process, you can actually do that on purpose, and you can do it with people that you have absolutely nothing in common with. And that's exciting.
Yeah. And I want to, this may infuriate viewers and listeners, but too bad for you. I want to put like a pause this, because I want to devote an entire episode around that, like that topic, right? Because that is exactly one of your great expertise. It fascinates me to really dig into that. And that, again, another skill that you can learn. You can learn it about yourself and others so that you can, dive in and connect with somebody like that. I want to stay on track here, though, with this process that you've gone through, that we can all go through and see how people really learn, how people learn effectively. We've all got our, first and second grade version of learning, but what's that? Some people never change. We don't get those lessons later on in life. Like, well, no, here's really how you should take in information, or you specifically should, because of your learning type or whatever that may be.
So how about I break down the main reasons that people fail when they're getting new information or trying to apply it, and then you can pick which one you want to focus on. How's that sound?
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I think this
applies. That was my
applies.
check question.
Yeah, very good. It's very good. And because this does apply on both sides when you're trying to learn something new, but also when you're trying to teach someone. And if you can expand that tool set to make sure that they're really going to take it in, then that's huge. If you're coaching someone, consulting with someone, or trying to, I think these are valuable lessons for that.
All right. So my first piece of advice is probably going to be a little strange, but hear me out. And this is super important if you're in a solo venture or you're an entrepreneur, but it's just as useful if you're part of an organization. If you are able to psychologically divorce yourself from your own identity for a moment and ask yourself, if I was this person's manager, what would my approach be? And the reason that you do that is that there are a lot of nascent objections or cognitive belief systems that you have as a person that make you either well inclined or resistant to new information. And there will be certain things that you can do that will be hard for you, but will also be really, really good for your process. And you have to look at yourself as your own manager first. And I think self-management is a really, really big gap for people. So before we go in all of the different, directions that we can go, and there's a few of these different systems, I'll just discuss one. We have what's called the performance pie, right? And in the performance pie, it's when you're a manager and something is not happening that you want to happen, you have to ask yourself, which one of these factors is the reason? Because it will dictate your approach. And those in order are feedback. Am I giving this person enough feedback every time that they try to execute a task so they know what they're doing right or they're doing wrong? Conditions. Have I given this person the correct tools that they need in order to be able to execute what it is that I've asked them to do? Knowledge. Have I trained this person? Does this person have the training that they need in order to be able to execute? And not only have they been trained, but have they been asked to demonstrate that skill after that training so you can actually see that they understand it? Measurement. Do they know how success is measured for what it is that they've been assigned to do? And because if they don't, then being able to generate consistent results is not going to happen. incentive? Do they know what's in it for them so that they have emotional buy-in and actually care about the process? Or because if they don't, they're only going to be doing the minimum required. Expectations. Are you holding that person accountable on a normal basis in order to be able to remind them of the importance of the behaviors and the expectations that you've given them in order to be able to keep that buy-in? And then last is capability. We try not to apply capability to ourselves, but you do have to think about it as a manager. Is this person actually capable of the task, in that have they successfully executed it at least once before you're trying to expect that out of them? Because if they haven't, then all the rest of the steps fall apart. And I think that approach is really helpful, because if you look at yourself as your own manager, you can ask yourself, well, am I getting feedback from other people on the skill that I'm trying to get? Do I have the tools in order to be able to excel at this thing? Do I need more training? What skills am I lacking? What does that success actually look like in its finished form, so that I know how it's measured to get there? What's in it for me? What do I get underneath of my belt? And how will my life be different if I acquire that skill? And then how am I going to hold myself accountable so that I can stay on schedule to achieve that goal and then still be able to add other things to my list of goals? And I think that if you break things down as your own manager, that you'll recognize that often we skip some of those steps with ourselves, especially. But also, if we are responsible for taking care of other people, and we do need to manage, other people, sometimes, especially if it's something that we personally are good at, we can forget that either not all people have the facility with that same skill that we do, or we can also forget our own process and how we acquired the skill in the first place, and then place expectations on other people to be able to execute without giving them the rest of the support that they need. So I think that that's really important. And then that kind of obviates that tree that I was talking about. And that'll be everything from, developing effective habits, having a peer group of people, a support system of people that are going to hold you accountable and give you the feedback that you need in order to know how you're doing with that skill. Do you know how to go backwards from a desired result and to systemize that and make that into steps so that when you make a goal that you're able to achieve it? Then have you identified what your personal belief systems and objections are about your product, your service, or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish? I think that there's a big, one of the things that the internet afforded us is we've all got the world's knowledge just sitting in our pockets, and the problem is epistemologically, how do we separate all of that information into something that's actually useful to us? And I think that it's the same thing for whether you're training people or you're coaching people or you're trying to accomplish your own skill. You have to be able to go through that process for yourself. So that's that primary framework. How do I establish habits? What's the science behind that? And how do I take care of these things that stand in the way? And there's quite a few of them. And sometimes they come from places that you wouldn't expect. Even sometimes our personal strengths can sabotage us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that viewpoint for a number of reasons. One, that objectivity, that you just the little mental reframe, the mind the game, if it needs to be for you to stand outside yourself and evaluate yourself as your own manager. It is that, because it is that objectivity that we're so lacking so often, because we all have that example in our life of, you hear somebody else's problem, you know exactly how to fix it. They're so thankful. Awesome. That's been great. But you may have the same problem and you can't see it. You cannot, when you're in it, whatever that is, why that happens, that objectivity.
Fear of failure. Fear of failure can be crippling too.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. But also, I love this idea and this approach of thinking in terms of being not just your own manager, but let's say you're a coach, you're a consultant, you you're trying to sell somebody into what you can convey and teach them. And if we actually take this mindset, which I don't think is done quite enough, and we apply it to our potential customer, our potential client, and actually be so invested in their success with this, not their purchase of this, that changes the game in your reputation, in your income level, in your fulfillment and everything. And I love the idea there as well.
Your results as a coach, your results as a consultant are your client's results. And I think that a missing step of synthesis for many coaches and many consultants is being able to understand the resistance to buy-in and execution that's going to exist in that client or in that organization, and then having a plan as an outsider of being able to get them invested in the changes that they're going to need that they don't know that they need, in order to be able to actually apply and use the advice that you're giving. And I think that diffusion of innovation, that resistance to new ideas, that if you want to get into literature, that hegemonic and counter-hegemonic, sociopolitical change things can be resistant to change. And as an autistic person, I know everything about being resistant to change. Change is very stressful, but if you can create the buy-in, because I think that one of the things that people miss, especially if they're learning their own skill, is getting themselves bought in. We think that when we decide to do something that we're already bought in, but all we've really done is decided to be interested. Deciding to actually carry it out and take action, that's another motivational step. And whether you're doing that for someone else or doing it for yourself, you have to close yourself on that. And then you have to ask yourself, what does that look or sound like? We're not just going to talk to each other in platitudes. Let's talk about the concrete. How do I break this down? Reduction to the ridiculous into tiny steps that are actually executable. What milestones will I have? What does that process look like? And when am I going to put it on my calendar and do it? And it's just like managing another person or managing yourself. And that can be a challenge for some people. And there are actually lots of disabilities, lots of sociological context, all kinds of things that can make that even harder for people. Everything from imposter syndrome to negative cognitive bias to, there's so many things that can stand as an impediment to that process. And being able to diagnose that in yourself and in others, and then how to overcome that so that you can drive that action, that is one of those things that's critically missing for most coaching and consulting, but also in management.
So how do you incorporate this and infuse this in your offering, in your, when you're going out to really help somebody, from the very beginning, even before they've ever bought in? How do you convey that your approach is different? It is more all encompassing, and their success is really critical for you.
This is going to be a bit of an aside. I will try not to go more than 5 minutes on it, but this is one of my spheres of special interest. So if I start doing the autistic thing, you're going to have to tap the brakes on me. Understanding personality types is really important, and I think that first off, you have to be able to look at personality types not as it's not like you're reading astrology in the paper. I mean, they're asking you direct questions about how you are. You're being honest about your responses, and then they're just taking that information and showing what happens when you take the statements that you've already made to them that are direct truths about yourself, and what happens when they go together, and then you start aiming them at different things. And there's lots of different personality systems out there. I use the Myers-Briggs. It's based on the original Jungian archetypes. And some people get very skeptical and resistant about that kind of stuff. And I think it's because of the Forer effect and astrology and all of that. But if you look at it as the actual science of personality, I think that recognizing your own cognitive approach to things does two things for you. One, it shows you how you're going to excel right? And what things are going to be weak for you. But it also teaches you, when you start to learn about other people's personality types, what the biggest impediments to communication or buy-in or whatever are going to be with that person coming from your perspective. You may function great with things like metaphors and all of that, but maybe another type of person, an F type or something, that maybe they need social proof, or maybe they need, emotional proof. Some people are closed by a transformative story and talking about, what it's like, what does it feel like to have the skills that you're going to have at the end of this. Some people need to see an example of social proof was from a source that they trust, so that they can overcome their own, Barnum effect of, being resistant. Oh, is this a scam or whatever? Because until you trust something, you're not going to, buy into it. So I think understanding differences in personality is important, whether you're training yourself or you're training someone else, because you have to be able to effectively communicate. And effective communication isn't just about transmitting ideas. It's about transmitting the emotional importance or the cognitive importance of different things. And each one of those things is judged individually by the system of the person who's receiving that information. I think that one of the reasons that, and there's a saying in entrepreneurship, people don't take advice that they don't pay for. But I think that oversimplifies it. And I think that it's because if a person has paid for it, then you've already resonated with them on one of those points to give them enough of an incentive to do it. It's not that the money indicates that they're going to be able to follow through. It's that they've decided to take the step, and the money is proof of that. And correlation is not causation. It's not just because they made a financial sacrifice. It's because it was important enough for them to go through with the decision and to be interested to learn more. But even the act of spending money on your coaching program or something like that doesn't necessarily indicate their level of buy-in. They might be clicking that saying, oh, that would be interesting. That might be something that might help me. So that might be something that might help me is not the attitude of a person who's going to take that information and carry it all the way to the finish line and use it to integrate into their success. Versus another person might click on that link and be like, oh, this is going to be worth the $500. I need that skill desperately. I'm going to have to get into a support group with 3 other people just to make sure that I do it. That person's going to kick ass. But both of those people clicked your buy button. So I think that it's a little simplistic, but sometimes we have to make simplistic points in order to prove bigger, far-reaching points. I think the first thing you do always is you need to be a model of the success that you are trying to teach to other people, because it's not just about them trusting you. It's not just about social proof. It's that people will see you as a version of themselves, but with that skill. What was their life like before? What was their life like after? And is that person like me? Is that something that I want to do too? And this is one of the things that I see most neglected always. And I discussed this briefly with Steve, is when people are thinking about their goals, often on that list, especially if you're like an NT type and you're an introvert, you don't necessarily put building social relationships with people on that list of goals. But if you want to be an effective entrepreneur or an angel investor or a consultant or a manager or a salesperson, you need to be able to move in and out of peer groups. And one of the peer groups that's most important to move into is surrounding yourself with people that have different versions of the kind of success that you want to have. And that creates an entire support system unconsciously. You can do it consciously. You can go into an entrepreneur group with that as a goal. But if your closest 4 friends are all into cryptocurrency and finance and business management and advertising, then when you talk about your ideas with them, when you have a meeting of the minds, when you sit down and have a drink with them, the amount of social accountability that you have for all of that, it enables your success, and you will naturally pick up behaviors, inclinations, and exposure to the things that you need to achieve your goals. And failing to do that, there's a temptation in us to surround ourselves with people that make us comfortable being ourselves. But comfort is the enemy of achievement. And if you are comfortable you're not growing. You have to be willing to put yourself into a challenging situation where you don't have the skills that you need. And that's why I think it's so important as a mindset to be looking for those challenging situations to put yourself in. And then because there's challenge involved, you gotta use that performance. Okay, so I'm gonna go put myself into this, this jewelry store that I'm uncomfortable with. What's in it for me? Am I going to get some feedback for this process? When I have a friend who's going to be checking in with me, oh boy, how was the first week of selling rocks? How did that go? What knowledge am I going to need to be able to excel in that environment? How is success measured there? What kinds of things am I going to be learning from the people that are there? And why is that important? Why do I want to be there? So that when I wake up, it's not me bleary-eyed hitting the alarm clock thinking, oh man, here we go again. It's okay. What did I learn yesterday? What's going to be different about today? Who am I working my shift with today? And what can I learn from them? What ideas? What are they good at? And maybe even if they're not good at anything, because, sometimes people in corporate are a paperweight, do they have a personality type that's challenging for me? Do I find that person irritating? Because if I do, maybe that's an opportunity for me to get better at relating to someone who has that personality type, so that when one of them walks on the property and they have that personality type, I'm not just rolling my eyes and be like, oh, great, here's another one. Let me just turn over to this person since they already do that. Challenge yourself. That mindset is everything. And I think that's so missed, that people get so integrated into the steps and they don't realize that whole process of persuasion, ethos, pathos, logos, all of that, it's all something that you have to do in your own process as well. So that was probably more than 5 minutes. I tried.
I love it. And that mindset. I mean, everybody watching, listening, like, take that into account with everything you do in your life. You could apply it just about anywhere, but it's so much more expansive and such a more open, engaging way to live and approach anything, especially those things that you're going to be doing anyway. I mean, if you're talking about your job and your work, you're doing so much of your life. If you can take this approach with it, wow, life becomes so much more interesting. And then
you can literally go from hiding in the closet, staying away from my mother or my grandmother's music lessons in the dark with a flashlight with a book, praying that everyone will leave and having no friends, to teaching communication and peer dynamic and interpersonal skills to hundreds of people in an emotionally driven industry. I did that for Kay and Jared, the largest retail jeweler in the United States. So if I can go from being an autistic kid, almost completely nonverbal, hiding in the closet, to doing that for hundreds of people and them being off managing their own stores and being confident and happy and successful, I can do anything. And knowing that you can do anything and looking at your past achievements, that's when we get into that cognitive bias. And you can let me know when you want to cover that, because that's a big one too.
Oh yeah, man, that's huge, because that's, it starts with a little spark. Like, hopefully we're giving people today in that, oh wow, maybe that, sales role that I was thinking about going into, that's so counter to what I I think I can achieve. Maybe that's actually possible. And yeah, and then taking that in, and like you're alluding to, like, look at what you have accomplished. It doesn't have to be, oh, I've been a great salesperson in the past. It can be, I've learned this skill in the past. I've done this. I've achieved this. And keeping that close at hand is definitely powerful.
Okay, so I'm going to address it because we're getting into cognitive bias now, and you're going to like this because it's important. It's important. So I know that, because you and I have been talking a little bit on the side just as the build up to this interview, and I gave you a book recommendation, The Dragons of Eden. What did you think of that? So that's by Sagan, by the way, if anyone hasn't read Carl Sagan.
Yeah, loved it. I devoured it. Great, yeah.
So what's cool about that book is it talks about some of the evolutionary processes that have gone into the development of the mind. And when you think about the fact that as thinking, feeling human beings, that we have a whole bunch of things that are built on evolutionary systems. We take things for granted sometimes, and I'll kind of, break it down to the ridiculous here just for a second. But the fact that my two fingers can't pass through each other, all right, we have a perception of three-dimensional space. We have a perception of solid objects. We have a perception, but those things aren't objective truth. Science has told us that, solid objects are just, things that are closer together and vibrating less. That temperature is actually, kinetic movement from vibration. That, our senses, our sensory systems, we have different numbers of nerves for like tactile response. And if you look at the nerve model, according to the brain of the human body, you get this really funny looking guy with really big lips and huge hands and stuff, because there are parts of the body where you get almost no physical sensation. And then there are parts in the body. I mean, you can ask anyone who's ever gotten a tattoo, not all parts of the body have equal sensitivity, right? So the way that you process your environment is based on evolutionary systems. The colors that you're able to see, I don't know if a lot of people consider this, but like you and I, we come from different genetic backgrounds. We're not the same people. I mean, even if we were twins, this would be true. We have different numbers of cones and rods in our eyes. We have different numbers of neurons in the occipital. We have different impressions and processing for our visual processing. We have different physical features of our eyes. And as a result, you and I, looking at exactly the same thing, the same flower, will not actually see the same color. There will be minor differences in the way that we perceive, or major differences if you're colorblind or whatever. So we both point at that and we say that that's a red flower. And that's because our whole life we've pointed at that color that we can see and we can call it red. And in the other person's experience, they can point at those same things and call it red. But have you ever considered that we might be seeing completely different colors and just pointing to the same thing and calling it red? And when you look at that thing and you're processing that information, you're looking at just a very narrow visible band of the electromagnetic spectrum. You're looking at where you're able to see that visible color, but that's not truth. Science has taught us that there's an entire expanse of the electromagnetic spectrum and that there's so much more going on there. So what evolutionary systems are designed to do is they favor our ability to survive and reproduce and to be able to adapt to the environment. It's not that touching solid objects is objective truth. It's that that's the information that we need in order to be able to excel with that one thing as far as evolution is concerned. And the rest of the information is not relevant, and so it's not evolutionarily favored. And you have to consider that that takes an effect on every single system in your body, everything from hearing to spatial orientation to your perception of time. All of those things have some genetic precursors as a result of evolutionary biology. And it goes with the stomach too. This is one of those things that gets people in Western society. The stomach does not have a calorie counter. It senses volume. How full are you? And so when we move into modern food technology, you could take a giant plate of oranges and eat them. You might only be able to eat 6 oranges and you're going to be, stuffed. But what happens if you take, 20 oranges and you squeeze them down into 2 glasses of orange juice? Well, now, because you have added technology to that process, you're now able to drink, 12, and that's just real simple. We're talking about very, very simple food processing here. That's 12 oranges worth of calories that are now in your stomach, and you're probably still going to feel hungry and want a primary piece of food. And the result of that is that sometimes our evolutionary systems, when combined with our technology, with our modern approaches, thinking, feeling human beings, can sabotage us. And this is crucial to understand when we start talking about the brain. And that the reason I'm discussing all of that is that the memory system of the brain is triggered by stress. And the reason it's triggered by stress is that, if a lion chases us up a tree, the brain needs to remember that, and it's going to put so much more focus, processing power on remembering that, the primacy of that, of that emotion and that memory, that you have to consider. Just like when I'm looking at a flower and I'm not seeing the whole electromagnetic spectrum, when I look at my memories, There's a reason that we see car crashes in slow motion because our adrenaline is spiked, our cortisol is spiked. And so the hippocampus is switched into overdrive. And it's almost like a high-speed camera taking, hundreds of frames per second. It's why time seems to slow down. So the problem is that when we have failures as human beings, that evolutionary system, just like the evolutionary system of the stomach with the calories, it predisposes us to remember and process negative things. And that's why none of us stays up at 2:30 in the morning with one eye open, thinking, boy, that job interview that I had 12 years ago went really well. We think about our worst experiences, we reprocess those because the brain needs to hold on to them for longer for survival from the evolutionary system. But as thinking, feeling human beings, this can create some real problems. And because positive experiences are lost. A lot of people will have to sit down and map out, really, really think what some of their biggest accomplishments are. And most of the time, they can't identify how it was that they felt when that accomplishment actually happened, unless it was recent. But most of us can remember the first time we almost got hit by a car or touched a hot stove or got dumped and what that felt like. So think about the effect that has on your narrative as a person. If you only remember with real primacy your failures or the negative things that have happened to you, how does that affect the way that you process your achievements? And how does it affect the way that you process your goals and your plans and what you're going to achieve and what your own objections are? And what you'll learn is that an entire life full of only remembering your failures will make it so that you get imposter syndrome. It will make you feel like if you get success, that you don't deserve it. It'll make you feel like when you have a new challenge that you can't do it. It'll make you feel like, and it's not your fault. It's literally how your brain processes the input. And if you can figure that out, then you do a couple of things. One, you can examine your existing belief systems and see whether or not they are actually accurate. And to do that, you need to use the window of other people, because other people can, using the mirror, of social reciprocity, be able to help you reframe things. And this is the big one for me, is that you can't stop the fact that process has been happening your whole life, but there is something that you can do differently. And that is that when you have an achievement, when you have a milestone, when you hit a goal, you have to take the time to celebrate it, not because, let's throw confetti, we're a party person, but because we need to create a flashbulb memory, a positive flashbulb memory of actual concrete achievement and success so that we can properly balance that against our failures and our challenges. And it's only by integrating those concepts that you can change your mindset, but also it can help you identify the negative belief systems that you have that may not have any rooting whatsoever in logical fact, that are holding you back from giving either yourself or someone else the buy-in to achieve a goal. And you see this in clients all the time. I see them in my coaching and consulting clients all the time. They have their own objections. And, Jonathan Swift said, you can't reason a person out of a position they didn't use reason to get to in the first place. So you have to identify that they have an emotional reaction to stimulus, and that stimulus is only being able to remember their failures. And when we get into, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's the essence of what CBT is. And I'm not a clinician, by the way. I've studied psychology for 2 decades, but it's been for my own development. But one of the things you can talk to if you have a therapist, if you have whatever, talk about the cognitive belief systems that you have, because they shape your entire life. And when you understand how to tinker with those systems, both in yourself and in others, you will unlock a power of persuasion that is incredible, but you will also unlock the ability to get out of your own way and to be happy with what you've achieved in life. And I think that that's a gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, yeah. So how do you is that transmission done when it comes to what we're talking about here in trying to teach somebody something new if they're not
Just about asking the right
it?
questions.
Like, okay,
You have
like
to
what?
go backward. So one of the cool things about cognitive beliefs is that they are so primal and so involved in everything that we do. The effects of them are actually obvious on your life. For instance, if you've had a few bad experiences with people and it's made you less trusting, and so you don't invest that emotional trust in your relationships, it will be clearly evinced in the relationships that you have with other people, how close you are to them, how much emphasis you place on them. All you really have to do is take a look at anything in your life or in someone else's life, and then ask the right questions. What beliefs do you have that have made that a reality? If you don't have close personal relationships and you can't share with anyone, why is that? What is the belief? Or what is your truth, if you want to say it that way, so that you don't make a person feel attacked? Because until you can figure out that your assertions are based on false information, then to you, they're facts, they're truth. And this is where people get caught up, is you have to get people to recognize that there is personal truth and that there is objective truth. One of the examples that I use a lot when I'm doing speaking and stuff like that is subjective human experience can be really powerful. Let's say you're, I don't know, let's say you're one evening you're watching TV, you nod off, you fall asleep, and you have this really intense, vivid dream about being, a woman in the 1800s in England. And for whatever reason, this crazy dream, everyone's names, dates, places. And when you wake up, you're confused by the experience. You pull out a dream journal. Before you forget this stuff, you write it all down. It bugs you for like a year. And then finally you're like, hell with it, I'm going to Europe anyway. I'm going to stop at this place and see if this weird dream I had has any root in reality. And you go there and you find the graves of the people that have these names, and you find the house that was in your, you will spend the rest of your life believing in reincarnation because you fell asleep watching the History Channel. Because that input went into your brain, it got incorporated into your dreams, and then through the process of verifying that information, you predispose yourself to a conclusion. You gave yourself confirmation bias, and now that has incorporated itself into a true belief system that you have, and you will vociferously tell people that, past lives are a real thing for the rest of your life because you've had this personal experience. So that's how powerful personal experience is. And you have to know that whoever it is that you're trying to transmit ideas to or trying to get them to try new things, that whatever belief systems they've talked themselves into are a result of equally powerful experiences. And when you can start to take that mental approach as a trainer, as a coach, as a consultant, as a manager, but also as a self-manager, it can help divorce you from that process of feeling like you're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, or the person won't be back, they're not going to follow through. Because you have to be able to find out their why, their how, but you also have to find out the beliefs, and that includes yourself. If you can learn to reprogram your beliefs as a person, there is no limit to what you can achieve in the realm of success if it's been done before. And then you'll also have the ability to reach past the limit of what's been done before and try for new things.
So powerful. Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm gonna wrap us here on this topic. I hope everyone is reeling in a positive way of what's possible here, and just like opening that box of like, oh wow, I'm going to approach everything very differently. And if somebody wants to connect with you, reach out, learn more, hire you, all that stuff, how do they find you?
What I'll do is I'll give you a copy of my electronic business card that you can share along with the podcast. That way someone can just click that, and it's got all of my various interviews and information about me. and my contact information. If you just want to be able to just open up a window and do something right now, my first name and my last name with a period in the middle at gmail.com. And I like to do exploratory calls with people, not because that's necessarily the best way to do coaching and consulting, but because to understand how applied behavioral psychology and cognitive neuroscience can help your brand, your business, your PR, your closing percentage, your sales team, all of that stuff. That stuff needs to be tailored to you, your industry, and I have to be able to demonstrate a facility and an understanding of what it is that you do and why for you to have buy-in to see what kinds of changes you could enact with that and how that could enable your success. And so I like to do that because I think that, because when I first got into this, I thought, maybe I should do some training videos on YouTube, or I should do this, or I should do that. And I think that it might be good for entertainment value, but if you want people to take that extra step, we have to go through that process that we just talked about and find out what it is the existing impediment to their process. Because I really take personal accountability for my results with people. And I want to not just, give them the door and see if they know how to step through it, because some people don't even know where the knob is. It's not that they don't want to get through the door. They don't know which way the door opens. And then they're just standing on one side of a door with decision paralysis, seeing what they want and then not being able to achieve it and not knowing why. And I think that one of the benefits of having a coach or a consultant is that sometimes we can get so lost in our own narrative that we can lose the objectivity that we need to see what's keeping us from our goals. And so that's what I like to help people with. And I can be very selective about the clients that I work with too, because when it's just you doing something, the limited resource is you. And I have a pretty full client load right now. So I want to make sure that I'm able to help that person. If not, I can send them off to resources and stuff that they need. But I really want to focus on that personal narrative and that connection, because when I do offer help, I want to stand behind my results 100% to the point where the person that I'm helping is going to rant and rave about me to everyone who will listen. And that's what I want to put out there for myself, for my personal brand.
Perfect. All right. This wraps part 1, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you want help creating authority-building video content or even a client-generating show of your own, go to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy in Action.